Hello, America! JOC here with your Ranting Politics headline updates, where we are diving into today's most explosive political stories that you need to know about. Coming up, we're bringing you the latest on the shocking arson attack at Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence that sent his family fleeing in the middle of the night during Passover celebrations. Police have arrested a suspect who's now facing terrorism and attempted murder charges. Then, it's a tale of two political worlds as Bernie Sanders took the stage at Coachella to rant about climate change and economic justice, while President Trump received thunderous applause at a UFC event in Miami. The stark contrast perfectly captures America's political divide in 2025. Also ahead, Wall Street veteran Ray Dalio, who correctly predicted the 2008 financial crisis, is sounding the alarm about something potentially worse than a recession if Trump's tariff policies aren't properly managed. We'll break down his warning signs and what they could mean for your wallet. In election integrity news, Arizona is taking action to remove non-citizens from voter rolls following a successful lawsuit. We've got details on how this impacts nearly 50,000 registrants across all 15 counties. Plus, the devastating Russian missile strike on a Ukrainian city during Palm Sunday that killed dozens of civilians, Taiwan's unusual plan to use 7-Eleven stores as war hubs if China attacks, and ESPN host Stephen A. Smith's surprising claim that he has no choice but to consider a presidential run in 2028. We'll also cover Britain's emergency measures to take control of their last steel producer, the ongoing dispute between the Trump administration and Maine over transgender athletes in women's sports, animal rights groups praising Trump for ending certain animal testing requirements, and the results of President Trump's latest physical examination, which notes excellent health despite scarring from last year's assassination attempt. It's a jam-packed show that you won't want to miss. This is Ranting Politics Headline Updates, America's fastest-growing daily news rundown designed for your commute. We don't align with a political party, we align with you, the American citizen. This is Ranting Politics Headline Updates. In a disturbing development out of Pennsylvania, state police have arrested 38-year-old Harrisburg resident Cody Balmer for an arson attack that targeted Governor Josh Shapiro's official residence during the first night of Passover. The attack sent the governor and his family fleeing their home in the middle of the night. According to authorities, Balmer is facing a slew of serious charges, including attempted murder, terrorism, aggravated arson, and aggravated assault against an enumerated person. This is no small-time vandalism, folks. We're talking about potentially life-altering charges that carry severe penalties. Governor Shapiro, who is Jewish, became visibly emotional when addressing the public about the 2 a.m. attack that occurred while he and his family were asleep. The timing couldn't have been more symbolic, happening during Passover celebrations when the governor had welcomed members of the Jewish community into his home for a Seder. Shapiro delivered a powerful message to the attacker saying, "If he was trying to terrorize our family, our friends, the Jewish community who joined us for a Passover Seder in that room last night, hear me on this. We celebrated our faith last night proudly, and in a few hours, we will celebrate our second Seder of Passover." Investigators believe Balmer managed to access the gated compound by jumping a fence. They've described the attack as targeted, though they haven't yet pinpointed a specific motive behind it. Thankfully, the entire Shapiro family was safely evacuated, and no injuries were reported. Governor Shapiro, a rising star in the Democratic Party who was first elected in 2022 after serving 6 years as Pennsylvania's Attorney General, took a strong stand against political violence following the attack. He didn't mince words when addressing the broader issue. "This type of violence is not okay," Shapiro declared. "This kind of violence is becoming far too common in our society. And I don't give a damn if it's coming from one particular side or the other, directed at one particular party or another, one particular person or another. It is not okay, and it has to stop. We have to be better than this." While Shapiro was on the short list of potential running mates for Kamala Harris in 2024 and is frequently mentioned as a potential presidential contender for 2028, the governor made it clear that this attack has only strengthened his resolve to serve Pennsylvanians. "Rest assured," he stated, "I will find a way to work even harder than I was just yesterday for the good people of Pennsylvania." This incident comes amid growing concerns about political violence and threats against public officials across the country. The New York Post was first to report on the arrest and charges, highlighting the increasingly dangerous environment that many elected officials now operate in. Talk about a political culture clash. This weekend showcased the deep divide in American politics as two very different political events unfolded simultaneously across the country. In the California desert, 83-year-old Senator Bernie Sanders traded his usual Senate chamber for the Coachella Music Festival stage, delivering a fiery speech that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with his signature political messaging. Sanders served as the surprise opening act for indie singer-songwriter Clairo, using his platform to rail against his pet causes to a crowd of festival goers. This country faces some very difficult challenges, and the future of what happens to America is dependent on your generation, Sanders told the Coachella attendees, many of whom had come for the music rather than a political lecture. But the Vermont senator wasn't about to miss this opportunity to preach to the young left-leaning crowd. We need you to stand up to fight for justice, to fight for economic justice, social justice, and racial justice. Sanders pontificated to an enthusiastic audience in the blue state of California. And in true Bernie fashion, he didn't hold back when mentioning President Trump, whose name triggered a chorus of boos from the crowd. Now we got a president of the United States, Sanders began before being interrupted by the negative reaction. I agree, he responded, playing to the crowd before launching into familiar talking points. He thinks that climate change is a hoax. He is dangerously wrong. And you and I are going to have to stand up to the fossil fuel industry and tell them to stop destroying this planet. Meanwhile, across the country in Miami, President Trump was receiving a completely different reception. As Sanders lectured about healthcare being a human right and railed against the billionaire class, Trump was basking in thunderous applause at UFC 314, where the crowd gave him a hero's welcome. The stark contrast couldn't have been more apparent. Sanders using his platform at a music festival to criticize Trump and advocate for an end to the terrible, brutal war in Gaza, while Trump connected with UFC fans in a battleground state that he won handily in the 2024 elections. These dueling appearances highlight how political figures are increasingly venturing beyond traditional venues to reach audiences, whether it's a music festival in California or a UFC event in Florida, as America's political and cultural divides continue to deepen. One of America's most renowned financial experts is sounding the alarm about potential economic trouble ahead, and he's warning it could be worse than a recession if the Trump administration doesn't handle its policies carefully. Ray Dalio, the billionaire founder of hedge fund Bridgewater Associates, who famously predicted the 2008 financial crisis, shared his concerns during a sobering interview on NBC's Meet the Press this weekend. I think that right now, we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession, Dalio told moderator Kristen Welker. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession if this isn't handled well. Dalio's warning came in response to a question about whether President Trump's tariff policies could push the United States into a recession. The financial expert didn't mince words about the precarious position he believes the country is in. We have a breaking down of the monetary order, Dalio explained, a topic he's been vocal about on social media. He compared the current economic landscape to the turbulent 1930s, noting that we are having profound changes in our domestic order, and we're having profound changes in the world order. According to Dalio, the combination of tariffs, excessive debt, and what he described as a rising power challenging the existing power creates changes that are very, very disruptive. He specifically highlighted concerns about America's unsustainable debt growth and creditors like China holding too much of it, along with the decline in U.S. manufacturing that has led to reliance on other countries for essential items. When pressed about what a worst-case scenario might look like, Dalio painted a grim picture that went well beyond typical economic concerns. I'm worried about the value of money, internal conflict that is not the normal democracy as we know it, an international conflict in a way that is highly disruptive to the world economy and could even be a military conflict, he said. Despite these dire warnings, Dalio believes the situation could still be managed very well. He urged members of Congress to pledge to reduce the budget deficit to about 3% of the gross domestic product, suggesting that without such action, we're going to have a supply-demand problem for debt at the same time as we have these other problems, and the results of that will be worse than a normal recession. In a lengthy post on X ahead of Trump's temporary reductions in his sweeping tariff increases, Dalio emphasized that while tariffs are important developments, people are mostly overlooking the vastly more important forces that are driving just about everything. The far bigger, far more important thing to keep in mind is that we are seeing a classic breakdown of the major monetary, political, and geopolitical orders, he wrote. This sort of breakdown occurs only about once in a lifetime, but they have happened many times in history when similar unsustainable conditions were in place. Bridgewater Associates, Dalio's hedge fund, famously anticipated the 2008 financial crisis, warning in 2007 of embedded risks in the system and predicting that interest rates would rise until there is a cracking of the financial system. His current warnings carry the weight of that previous accuracy, making his concerns about today's economic vulnerabilities all the more significant. Stay with us as we take a quick break to hear from our lead sponsor, whose support helps make this show possible.
Hey, you brilliant inventors and creators. Have you crafted a product that's ready to break out from the digital world and hit the physical shelves? Imagine your creation sitting proudly in stores like Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, where 90% of purchases still happen. Well, it's time to turn that vision into reality with Product Fury. At Product Fury, we specialize in bridging the gap between online innovation and retail giants. In fact, we have secured millions of dollars of royalty deals for dozens of products at big box retail stores. Whether you're selling gadgets, home goods, or anything innovative, we're here to amplify your reach. Don't keep your product confined to the web. Visit www.productfury.ai today to submit your information for a free product evaluation. Let's get your products out of the internet cloud and into customer carts. Remember, that's productfury.ai. Make the leap from clicks to bricks and see your product thrive in the bustling aisles of major retailers. It's your time to shine on the big stage. Visit us now.
A major election integrity initiative is now underway in Arizona, where all 15 counties have begun the process of verifying and potentially removing non-citizens from their voter rolls. This comes after a successful lawsuit by America First Legal that's targeting nearly 50,000 registrants who failed to provide proof of U.S. citizenship when they registered to vote. James Rogers, senior counsel for America First Legal, called the settlement a great result for all Arizonans, following his organization's lawsuit against the 15 Arizona counties. The legal action was filed on behalf of Ezaz.org and Yvonne Cahill, a registered voter and naturalized citizen. The lawsuit argued the counties weren't following state law requiring proof of citizenship to vote in local and state elections. It also contended that the state wasn't conducting required monthly checks of the rolls for non-citizens. Now, as a result of the legal action, all 15 counties have begun working with the Department of Homeland Security to verify the citizenship status of registered voters who failed to provide citizenship proof when they registered. This is where it gets a bit complicated. While a 2013 Supreme Court ruling prevents states from imposing voter registration requirements beyond the federal requirement that registrants check a box affirming their U.S. citizenship, Arizona residents are still required to provide actual proof of citizenship to vote in state and local elections. Arizona law also mandates that county recorders perform monthly list maintenance to confirm U.S. citizenship of what are called federal-only voters. That list of nearly 50,000 individuals who didn't provide proof of citizenship and were therefore only allowed to vote in federal elections, not state or local ones. Under the law, registrants confirmed to be citizens are moved to the regular voter list, while those found to be non-citizens have their registrations canceled. But according to the lawsuit, county recorders weren't utilizing available resources to verify citizenship status. Rogers explained the significance of the settlement, saying, "This will help county recorders find and remove any aliens on their voter rolls. It will also potentially enfranchise federal-only voters whose citizenship is confirmed, which would allow them to vote in state and local elections." The verification process has now kicked into gear across the state. All 15 counties have sent requests to DHS seeking assistance in their efforts to clear voter rolls of non-citizens, a move that election integrity advocates are hailing as an important step forward. Rogers added that his organization congratulates each of Arizona's 15 county recorders for taking this bold and important step for election integrity in the state. The verification and potential removal of non-citizens from voter rolls comes amid heightened national attention on election security ahead of the 2026 midterms, with both Democrats and Republicans focused on ensuring that only eligible voters participate in elections. Tragedy struck Ukraine on Palm Sunday as Russian missiles tore through the heart of the city of Sumy, killing at least 34 people, including 2 children. The devastating attack happened as residents gathered to celebrate the religious holiday, leaving a community shattered and the international community outraged. Ukrainian officials report that 2 ballistic missiles struck the city around 10:15 a.m. The first hit buildings belonging to a city university, while the second exploded above street level, seemingly designed to maximize casualties. Beyond the deaths, another 117 people were wounded in the attack, including 15 children, according to Ukraine's state emergency service. Images from the scene painted a horrific picture. Lines of black body bags along the roadside, bodies wrapped in foil blankets among the debris, and emergency crews battling to extinguish fires in burned-out cars amid the rubble of damaged buildings. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky didn't mince words in his response, saying, "Only filthy scum can act like this, taking the lives of ordinary people." The head of Zelensky's office, Andriy Yermak, claimed the strike used cluster munitions specifically to maximize civilian casualties, though these claims couldn't be independently verified. This attack follows another deadly missile strike just days earlier on April 4th in Zelensky's hometown of Kryvyi Rih that killed around 20 people, including 9 children, suggesting a disturbing pattern of targeting civilian areas. French President Emmanuel Macron condemned the attack, stating it undermined Washington-led peace talks between the warring sides. Everyone knows this war was initiated by Russia alone, and today it is clear that Russia alone chooses to continue it. With blatant disregard for human lives, international law, and the diplomatic efforts of President Trump, Macron said in a statement. The timing of the attack is particularly significant, coming just one day after Russian and Ukrainian diplomats accused each other of violating a tentative U.S. brokered deal to pause strikes on energy infrastructure. The attack also raises fears about a potential Russian spring offensive that Ukrainian officials have been warning about. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had claimed that Ukraine had been attacking us from the very beginning, every passing day, while his Ukrainian counterpart, Andriy Sybiha, contested this, stating that Russia had launched nearly 70 missiles, over 2,200 exploding drones, and more than 6,000 guided aerial bombs at Ukraine, mostly at civilians, since agreeing to the pause on strikes. The violence wasn't limited to Sumy. On the same day, Russian attacks in Ukraine's Kherson region killed 3 people, and another person died during shelling in the Donetsk region. Meanwhile, in Kharkiv, a Russian strike hit a kindergarten, though fortunately no casualties were reported there. U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg said the Sumy attack crossed any line of decency and reaffirmed the White House's commitment to ending the conflict. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the attack horrifying and described it as a tragic reminder of why the administration was trying to secure a just and durable peace. As rescue operations continue in Sumy, this Palm Sunday attack stands as a grim reminder of the human cost of a war now dragging into its 4th year with no clear end in sight, despite ongoing diplomatic efforts. In what could be described as convenience store conscription, Taiwan is eyeing a remarkably practical wartime strategy by transforming its ubiquitous 7-Eleven stores into emergency hubs should China ever launch an attack on the island nation. According to reporting from The Guardian, Taiwan's government is seriously considering plans to utilize its network of more than 13,000 7-Eleven convenience stores as critical infrastructure during a potential conflict. These stores, which dot virtually every neighborhood across the island, would serve dual roles as both supply depots and communication centers. The plan would see these familiar storefronts stockpiling essential rations and medical supplies for the Taiwanese population. But perhaps more ingeniously, they would function as emergency communication outposts in a scenario where China cuts off internet access to the island, a likely first move in any invasion attempt. Citizens would be able to send messages through the store's emergency hotspots, creating a grassroots communication network when traditional channels fail. Meanwhile, government officials would distribute critical information and updates via fax to the stores, where messages would be printed and displayed in windows for the public to read. A low-tech solution to a high-tech problem. While the strategy might seem unusual, it builds on Taiwan's existing emergency response frameworks. These same 7-Elevens have already proven their value during previous crises, including the COVID-19 pandemic and in the aftermath of earthquakes that have struck the island. The contingency planning comes amid escalating tensions across the Taiwan Strait. China has long claimed the self-ruled democratic island as part of its territory and has ramped up aggressive military drills in recent years. Just last week, Beijing conducted exercises in the Taiwan Strait following U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's visit to Asia, where he pledged to counter Chinese aggression. Taiwan's president, Lai Ching-te, has been actively preparing for various crisis scenarios, assembling a team of 27 senior cabinet and national security ministers who have already met 3 times to develop response plans. The team reportedly conducted a live drill last week to test their preparedness. My friends, if you're enjoying the insights and the independent ethos we're dishing out here at Ranting Politics, don't be a stranger. Jump into the lively conversation on X. Give us a follow at RantingRP or check us out at rantingpolitics.com and subscribe to our newsletter or stop over to our all-new YouTube channel. We're always buzzing about the next big headline and love to see your takes on the fiasco that is politics. And while you've got that phone handy, come on, I know it's in your reach. Do us a solid and tap that like and follow button on your podcast feed. Your support doesn't just boost our reach, it keeps real independent thought in the game against those giant media machines. We're also on all your favorite podcast platforms, from Apple Podcasts to Spotify and now Alexa. Hit that subscribe button for regular updates chock full of unfiltered analysis and all the news that's fit to rant about. Okay, now stand up and stretch. We will be right back to talk about Mother Britain finally taking steps to secure its industries.
Is your home's landscaping, exterior style, or outdoor space ready for a transformation? Whether you're lakeside or curbside, make the most of your property with Garden and Grow Design, your premier digital landscape designers. At Garden and Grow Design, we specialise in increasing the value and beauty of your home by crafting elegant outdoor living spaces. Our experienced and creative designers use cutting-edge 3D technology to blend seasonal colours, perennial blooms and stylish hardscapes into your ideal garden. And the best part? It's all designed for minimal maintenance. Don't just imagine your perfect yard. See it first with our innovative digital designs. Whether it's a serene waterfront retreat or a chic patio for entertaining, we bring your outdoor dreams to life. Ready to grow? Visit www.gardenandgrowdesign.com to start your journey toward a breathtaking landscape today. Garden and Grow Design. Cultivate beauty, cultivate life.
I'm Imogen Folks, the host of Inside Geneva, a podcast where we tackle the big questions facing our planet. Can UN investigations bring more criminals to justice? Does the world need a pandemic treaty? What about climate change or refugees? Should we ban autonomous weapons? Some call them killer robots. Get the answers you need with me and our expert guests twice a month on Inside Geneva, free with your usual podcast app.
Britain has taken extraordinary measures to save its steel industry from collapse, with Parliament recalled for its first Saturday emergency session since the Falklands War in 1982. The UK government has moved to seize control of British steel and keep its blast furnaces operational amid dire financial circumstances. The China-owned company, which employs 3,500 people at its Scunthorpe plant, has been hemorrhaging money at an alarming rate of £700,000. That's about $900,000 every single day. Without government intervention, the company's furnaces faced imminent closure. Prime Minister Keir Starmer didn't mince words about the gravity of the situation, acknowledging that the emergency legislation was pretty unprecedented but necessary to preserve Britain's steel industry. The bill will go through today, and that means that we will then be in control of the site, Starmer said during a visit to the steelworks. Business Minister Jonathan Reynolds told lawmakers that while the government hopes to eventually partner with the private sector, full nationalization is increasingly looking like the most viable option. A transfer of ownership to the state remains on the table, and it may well at this stage, given the behavior of the company, be the likely option, Reynolds said. The closure of British Steel's furnaces would leave the UK as the only G7 nation unable to produce virgin steel from iron ore. This would make Britain entirely dependent on foreign imports for a material that's essential to national security and infrastructure. The government had already earmarked £2.5 billion for the steel industry and promised to publish a strategy for the sector in spring 2025. If the company is ultimately nationalized, it would represent the largest state rescue since several banks were taken into government hands during the 2008 financial crisis. British Steel's struggles aren't unique. The company has been battling in an oversupplied global market for years. Recent energy price spikes and newly imposed U.S. tariffs of 25% on all steel imports have only worsened the situation. According to industry body UK Steel, the U.S. receives about 5% of British steel exports, worth approximately £400 million annually. The emergency law cleared its initial parliamentary stages without opposition, reflecting the cross-party recognition of steel's strategic importance to the British economy. Unions representing steelworkers and industry bodies have welcomed the government's decisive action to preserve both the country's steelmaking capability and thousands of jobs in an industry that has defined communities like Scunthorpe for generations. A federal judge has stepped into a heated confrontation between the Trump administration and the state of Maine, ordering the USDA to unfreeze federal funding while the dispute over transgender athletes continues to simmer. District Court Judge John Woodcock issued a temporary restraining order Friday in response to Maine's legal challenge against the Department of Agriculture's funding freeze. The standoff began on April 2nd, when USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins announced the agency was pausing federal funds to Maine after Democratic Governor Janet Mills refused to bar transgender-identifying males from competing in girls' sports. Rollins made it clear in her letter to Mills, "You cannot openly violate federal law against discrimination in education and expect federal funding to continue unabated." The USDA specifically targeted certain administrative and technological functions in schools, while emphasizing that the pause would not impact federal feeding programs or direct assistance to Mainers. Rollins added that the freeze would end immediately if Mills complied with federal law. Maine Attorney General Aaron Frey quickly filed a federal complaint arguing that the USDA was illegally withholding grant funds that go to keeping children fed. According to court documents, Maine's child nutrition program had received or was due to receive more than $1.8 million for the current fiscal year, with another $900,000 in prior year funds currently inaccessible. The program was also anticipating roughly $3 million typically awarded each July for summer meal programs. In issuing his restraining order, Judge Woodcock carefully noted that his decision doesn't weigh in on the larger dispute about transgender athletes. It merely addresses the immediate funding freeze. The conflict stems from President Trump's executive order on keeping men out of women's sports, which aims to protect female student athletes from having to compete with or against or having to appear unclothed before males. The order mandates federal departments to review and potentially rescind funding to education programs that fail to comply. Maine officials have publicly refused to follow the directive, citing state law that allows students to play on teams matching their gender identity. The conflict gained national attention in February when a transgender-identifying boy claimed victory in Maine's Class B championship for the Greeley High School girls track and field team. President Trump and Governor Mills engaged in a public exchange over the issue at the Republican Governors Association dinner in February. "We are the federal law. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding if you don't," Trump warned. Mills fired back with, "See you in court," to which Trump responded, "Good. See you in court. That should be a real easy one. Enjoy your life after, Governor. I don't think you'll be in elected office." Both the Department of Education and Department of Health and Human Services subsequently launched investigations and found Maine in violation of Title IX. Just this Friday, Maine responded to a DOE letter, refusing to sign a resolution agreeing to comply with the Trump administration's interpretation of Title IX, stating, "We agree that we are at an impasse." The Department of Education has now begun the process of referring its investigation to the Department of Justice for further enforcement and is working to terminate Maine's federal K-12 funding entirely. This signals that despite the temporary restraining order on USDA funding, the broader battle over transgender athletes and federal funding is far from over. In a surprising turn of events, the Trump administration is receiving an unexpected wave of support from animal rights organizations following recent announcements to end animal testing within key federal agencies. Both the FDA and EPA have unveiled plans to phase out traditional animal testing requirements, marking what many advocates call a significant victory for animal welfare. PETA's Senior Vice President, Kathy Guillermo, praised the FDA's decision, calling it a significant step towards meeting the agency's commitment to replace the use of animals. The organization further urged the FDA to embrace 21st century science by ending all animal testing, including experiments on primates at federally funded research centers. On Thursday, FDA Commissioner Martin Makary announced the agency would phase out animal testing requirements for antibody therapies and other drugs. Instead, the FDA will encourage testing on organoids, artificially grown masses of cells that mimic human organs. Dogs, rats, and fish have been the primary subjects for these tests until now. For too long, drug manufacturers have performed additional animal testing of drugs that have data in broad human use internationally, Makary explained. By leveraging AI-based computational modeling, human organ model-based lab testing, and real-world human data, we can get safer treatments to patients faster and more reliably, while also reducing R&D costs and drug prices. It is a win-win for public health and ethics. On the same day, EPA Chief Lee Zeldin announced the agency would reinstate a 2019 policy from Trump's first administration that aims to completely phase out animal testing by 2035. An EPA spokesperson noted that the Biden administration had halted progress on these efforts by delaying compliance deadlines, but that Zeldin is wholly committed to getting the agency back on track. The White Coat Waste Project, which previously exposed controversial Beagle experiments under Dr. Anthony Fauci's leadership at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, also celebrated the announcements. White Coat Waste made historic progress under Trump 45 to cut wasteful and cruel animal testing at the EPA and FDA, some of which was undone by the Biden administration, said Justin Goodman, the group's senior vice president. Not everyone is convinced alternatives are ready to fully replace animal testing. Matthew Bailey, president of the National Association for Biomedical Research, cautioned that no AI model or simulation has yet demonstrated the ability to fully replicate all the unknowns about many full biological systems, arguing that humane animal research remains indispensable. This isn't the first time the Trump administration has taken steps to protect animals. During his first term, Trump signed the Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act into law in 2019, making intentional acts of cruelty a federal crime. For now, animal rights advocates are celebrating what they see as a significant shift in federal policy, while researchers debate how quickly and completely testing alternatives can replace traditional animal models in ensuring drug safety. The White House has released the results of President Trump's annual physical, and according to Navy Captain Sean P. Barbabella, the physician to the president, Trump remains in excellent health. The comprehensive examination, which took place Friday morning at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, included diagnostic and laboratory testing, along with consultations from 14 specialty consultants. The detailed report outlines the president's vital statistics, standing at 75 inches tall, weighing 224 pounds, with a resting heart rate of 62 beats per minute and blood pressure of 128/74. His temperature registered at a normal 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, with pulse oximetry at 99% on room air. Perhaps most notable in the physical findings was the mention of scarring on the right ear from a gunshot wound, a stark reminder of the assassination attempt on the president earlier this year. Despite this, the examination raised no significant abnormalities or red flags regarding the president's overall health. The report also highlighted Trump's lifelong abstinence from tobacco and alcohol as a positive factor in his medical history. Currently, the president takes 4 medications, rosuvastatin and ezetimibe to control cholesterol, aspirin for cardiac prevention, and mometasone cream as needed for a skin condition. Barbabella specifically credited Trump's active lifestyle as contributing significantly to his well-being. President Trump's days include participation in multiple meetings, public appearances, press availability, and frequent victories in golf events, noted the release. The physician concluded that Trump exhibits excellent cognitive and physical health and is fully fit to execute the duties of the commander-in-chief and head of state. This clean bill of health comes as the president continues to maintain a busy schedule, balancing the demands of office with public appearances. The annual physical is standard protocol for sitting presidents, but this year's report draws additional attention following concerns about presidential health that have dominated political discourse throughout recent election cycles. The White House has been transparent with the results, providing specific metrics that suggest Trump is in robust health, despite his age and the physical toll of the presidency. Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode of Ranting Politics Headline Updates. I've been your host, JOC, bringing you the unfiltered truth about what's happening across America and around the world. From Governor Shapiro's terrifying Passover arson attack to Bernie Sanders ranting at Coachella, from economic storm warnings to Taiwan turning convenience stores into war rooms, we've covered a lot of ground today without the partisan spin you'll get elsewhere. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to keep up with our daily news rundowns, make sure you follow us on X at RantingRP. You can also catch full episodes on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. For more in-depth analysis and all our latest content, head over to rantingpolitics.com, America's fastest-growing daily news program designed for your commute, run, or coffee break. Remember, we don't align with any political party. We align with you, the American citizen. This is JOC signing off, and thank you, our loyal listeners, for choosing Ranting Politics Headline Updates. We'll be back soon with the updates you need to navigate these interesting times. Until then, stay tuned, stay informed, and as always, stay free.